welcome back to the Winning Play Podcast. I'm your host, Drew James, here with other hosts, Kendall Capps and Robb Hue. We're going to break down Week 6 in the NFL. We're going to get to Week 7. But first, holy cow, just this morning, breaking news after breaking news. I don't know, Kendall, pick a topic to start with. Let's start breaking down everything that's happened this morning.
Let's dive into Devante, knowing he might have the biggest impact, and he's the biggest name. The Jets have agreed to take on all of his salary and have completed or are about to complete the trade with the Las Vegas Raiders. So he gets reunited with Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers seemingly is getting everything he wants. He gets his coach fired that he doesn't like. He brings his drinking buddy over. He brings Cobb over. He brings Lazard. Well, now he's got Devante Adams. What other excuse if things fall flat is he going to have? I don't know.
And by the way, after blaming Mike Williams for that wrong route he ran last night, now he's on the trading block. So I mean, it's Aaron Rodgers' show 100% to the Jets.
I think next week he's going to recommend that they change their name to the Packers.
Yeah, it is pretty wild.
I mean, the Jets had to make a move. Obviously, they're looking rough. And then all of a sudden the Bills come in and match them, picking up Amari Cooper off the Browns. Amari definitely looked like he was ready for a new spot, a change of scenery. But now you've got Josh Allen with a legit receiver again. Which of these teams is coming out stronger in the AFC East right now?
Well, the Bills just beat the Jets without Amari Cooper. So, I mean, I think the Bills are just more in the driver's seat. But this is going to be a really fun...
But the Jets didn't have Devante Adams.
Yeah, 100%. I just think, they already have the lead in the division, and so it's going to be up to the Jets to make up that ground. But this is going to be a really, really fun race for the division winner here. All of a sudden.
Well, and I think last night we saw that neither team, honestly, is all that good. The mistakes made by both teams on both sides of the ball. I mean, the Jets with their vaunted defense, Aaron Rodgers has their head coach, who was basically a defensive coordinator, fired. Lo and behold, Ray Davis, an unheralded rookie, runs all over them all game. I think the Jets are certainly looking at an uphill battle, but I also think the Bills are not nearly as good as that 3-0 start that we saw, and that was more of a mirage in who they were playing early in the season. So, it's possible that it's still a race, but you're right, Rob. Having the 2-game cushion, having won the first head-to-head, and let's not forget, if Tua does return, Miami also is 2 back, and there's a long way to go. But that, of course, is dependent upon how long Tua can stay on the field, assuming he even comes back.
Well, and the Dolphins team didn't really look great before Tua got hurt. They might have some holes to fill. I know there's some trade rumors starting to swirl in Miami, but we'll get to that, I guess, if it comes. Let's switch over to the NFC real quick. We all watched the Lions completely destroy the Dallas Cowboys, 47-9, running trick plays to offensive linemen. It really looked like Dan Campbell was enjoying himself, as were the Lions. On the Cowboys side, it doesn't look like anybody's having fun. Are the Cowboys completely done for the year? Should we write them off? They were now a third of the way through the NFL season. I think it's time to start saying some teams don't have it. Are the Cowboys one of them?
Well, happy birthday, Jerry Jones. That was on his birthday. An ultimate beatdown. The Lions wanted that badly. The match they had last year left a sour taste in their mouth, and they wanted to go out there and destroy him, and they did. I have this thing with Dallas where they got a bye week now. Couldn't have come at a better time to regroup. And, as a CD owner, I've been paying attention to Dak and CD. And while Dak looked awful, I just have, you go back last year and they kind of actually did the same thing they're doing now, where they looked all defunct and then they kind of picked it up after the bye week and really figured it out and took off. And I just, I'm going to use that data set to say there's still hope. Now, obviously, this start to the year is very concerning. They got to include Rico Dowdle more, and they came out and said they will. But, based on evidence and not just hopium, as they call it, I'm going to go back to last year and kind of translate this year and say there's still a chance they can figure it out.
Nope. I'm off the train. See you later. The train has left the station. When you can't run the football and you can't stop other teams from running the football, and you're without your two best players, and on offense you have one weapon, you have one guy. That's it. They're and just a bunch of scrubs everywhere else. Let's face it. Like Zeke is complaining he doesn't like that he's being phased out. It's like, dude, you're like 37 years old. Like,
Yeah.
what do you expect? Like, were you expecting to come in there and get the ball 22 times a game? They are just a hot mess. I agree that the bye certainly comes at a great time for them, but to take the worst home loss in team history, the way they did, and like you said, Drew, like the fact that the Lions were trying everything they could to get offensive linemen, touchdowns in that game. They were out there to make a statement, and I think the rest of the league heard it, and it was certainly felt in Jerry world. Which did you guys hear Jerry Monday morning when he was on a radio show with the fan in Dallas going off? And it's like, dude, man, like it's just further evidence that your owner / GM he's on early onset senility. Like, dude has lost it. He doesn't know what he's doing. And as long as he's there, that ship is just sinking quickly.
I'm with you on the running away from the train. The defense is the bit, like you said, they have no one on offense, but their defensive guys are hurt and they're not coming back for a while. The last 3 games, I think if you combine the 2 Lions running backs, each of the last 3 weeks, they've given up like 175 all-purpose yards and 2 touchdowns to the running backs each of the last 3 weeks. Kamara did it, Derrick Henry did it, and then the Lions combo did it. But they couldn't stop anything. And I don't see that changing with their guys not coming back from injury. And then, and you also don't have a running back on your team. And you have 1 wide receiver. And, like, that's about it. I think, especially looking at how well the Commanders are playing, but I still think Philly looks better than Dallas. And at this point, the Giants look quite a bit better than Dallas. I think this is going to be a hangover year after the guys got their contracts signed, and they will miss the playoffs would be my call.
Well, and let's not forget, it's been 20 years since we've had a repeat division winner in that division. Dallas won the division last year, so it holds to form. I think, safe to say, especially with the depth in the NFC North, like it's going to be tough sledding for them to make a run.
Well, speaking of that, the NFC North, which of these 4 teams, they have the highest point differential in the league, all 4 of them are the top 4. Which of them are for real and which ones are an illusion at this point?
It's hard to really pick one that you don't believe in. I've been, screaming from the mountaintops. Houston and Detroit were 2 of my darlings entering the year. And I think Detroit might still be the most talented team top to bottom. But that Aiden Hutchinson injury, which, oh my God, like if you watch the video, it was nauseating to look at. It reminded me of Gordon Hayward, where like his leg was over here, his foot was over there, and then you realize, oh wait, those 2 things are supposed to be connected. Like it was that bad. So it remains to be seen what that Lions front will be without him. But they're so talented, though. They're going to be there in the end. Minnesota, like, I'm sorry, the way they're playing, it's hard to say that this is a mirage. They've beaten really, really good football teams. Chicago's defense we knew was legit coming into the season, and they still look legit. And now Caleb is getting better and better and better every week. And the Packers, Jordan Love, who I thought he would lead the league in touchdown passes, he might not now because he missed a couple of games, but dude has thrown at least 2 touchdown passes in 8 straight games. That offense is legit. So, like, they're all pretty darn good. It's the first time in NFL history, actually, that through 6 weeks, the 4 best point differentials are all in the same division. Never happened before in the NFL. That's going to be a fun division to watch all year long.
Yeah, going into the year with all the free agent and off-season acquisitions they had, the draft picks and everything included, I was really excited for this division, and it's delivering so far. I mean, you can make an argument for or against the validity and the longevity of the success for these teams. I mean, if you want to with Vikings, you still could lean on the reliability or lack thereof of Sam Darnold if you wanted to, or the injury to Aaron Jones, perhaps. Caleb Williams and the Bears are coming on now, and this is what, we all forget that sometimes it takes rookie QBs, just regardless of the situations they come in, to kind of find their footing in the NFL, and Caleb looked great. Obviously it was against the hapless Jaguars, but, the arrow is pointing up for Chicago as well. So I agree, it's hard to pick any of them. I will say I'm more concerned about the Lions moving forward with Hutchinson out now for the season for sure, because that defensive front doesn't have a lot of capital put into it, and he had more sacks and pressures than the rest of the defensive line combined. So for me, yes, they have probably the most talented and put together offense in the NFL, but now, without a D line and a monster, he's the best defensive player and was playing like the defensive player of the year. When you lose that, and all you do is pick up a guy off the Bengals practice squad, I don't even know his name. That's a real concern because they're not going
and
to
their
be
secondary was
pressuring
also
QBs.
not very good too. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was with a monster there creating pressures and stuff. So, and then with the Packers, there's still a little bit of this Jekyll and Hyde with Love going on, and they've had some injuries at wide receiver, so we'll have to see how that shakes out. Now, LaFleur's offense is kind of built on unpredictability. It's going to be one receiver one day and the other receiver another day and stuff like that, just depending on what the defense is doing. Then they'll lean on Josh Jacobs. So, yeah, I mean, like as Kendall went through, there's an argument to say all of them are legit, and then I think there's a decent argument to point out flaws and weaknesses for all of them.
I'm with you on most of them. I do think that big game this week, the Lions-Vikings, is going to give us a good taste of how well the Lions defense can hold up without Hutchinson. And I think Green Bay is just getting started. I think they're going to get even better as the year goes on. The one I'm not sold on yet is the Bears. Yes, Caleb Williams is looking better, but the Bears are 4-2. Look at the teams they've beat. 3 of those teams they beat are 1-4. And the other team they beat is 1-5 in the Jaguars. They have not beat a team with 2 wins yet. So I am going to hold off. I think the Bears are on a bye this week. They come back and play the Commanders, and then they get 2 more sleepers against Cardinals Patriots. But this stretch of games they have in November, they play the Packers, then the Vikings, then the Lions, then the Niners, then the Vikings, then the Lions, then the Seahawks, then the Packers to end the season. I'll see how Caleb Williams fares with that murderer's row the last 8 games of the year. I think, though, with the Hutchinson injury, I'd probably have the Vikings as the favorite at the moment. Another NFC team we talked about last week, probably our biggest game of the week, Ravens versus Commanders. The Ravens kind of controlled the whole game. The final score was close, but I don't think the Ravens were ever really in jeopardy. How much do you take away from that? Does that hurt what you think of Jaden Daniels and the Commanders? Is this just kind of growing pains? And are the Ravens really the best team in the NFL right now?
Well, what's wild is the Commanders lost, and they were trailing all game long. And Jaden Daniels had his worst game since week 1. And in his worst game, he still completed 75% of his passes for 250 yards and 2 touchdowns and did not turn the ball over. And that's his worst game. Like, I don't know how much more upward an arrow can possibly point for a quarterback at this point in his career. It's pretty damn impressive watching this guy play. And in that division that, as we talked about, Dallas is in shambles, and Philly still doesn't look near what a lot of people thought they were going to. I'd probably have them as the favorite at this point in the division. So I'm not too worried about Daniels or the Commanders.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Jaden Daniels a couple weeks ago and talked about, can he sustain this? And I think, we all kind of touched on the fact that his decision making, whether he's actually producing on the ground or through the air, he has kind of up and down games on those productions, but either way, no matter what it is, it looks like his decision making is sound, and I think that's what's going to be carrying him through. You talked about 75% in one of his worst games of completion percentage, and so yeah, I mean, he looked great. The Ravens, the last couple years have been one of the best regular season teams, so I think their defense has taken that step back, but their offensive line, which I predicted to take a step back, hasn't really looked like it has taken that step back. So, it looks like they still have one of the best O-lines, and, Derrick Henry's been an absolute monster behind that. So, I would say this is less about Jaden Daniels and more about, the Ravens finding their stride.
Yeah, I think the Ravens are definitely looking like the team to beat at this point. I mean, I know the Chiefs are sitting there on a bye week saying, hey, we're undefeated, and there's definitely some NFC North teams to talk to, but the Ravens look like they have the most control over what is going to happen in the postseason at this point. I think the first seed is definitely theirs for the taking, assuming Kansas City starts dropping a couple of games. I just can't see them going 17.
Yeah, but that's the whole thing. They're 2 back in the loss column, and they lost the tiebreaker.
And they lost to the Chiefs. That's very true. But
So they're
as far
really
as just
three back. Like that.
the eye test, they look like the best team in the league to me, right? And Derrick Henry looks like a lock to score a touchdown every single week. As we get into fantasy talk, he's definitely probably my MVP of the year, I would think. Which does bring us, before we get to fantasy, let's go through a couple of the big injuries this week in the NFL. We had Marvin Harrison Jr. with concussion. He'll probably be out at least this week. Chris Olave, concussion, probably out again this week. Rashid
Yep.
Shaheed, I think the Saints play Thursday,
Yeah, they're
and
all
he's not
definitely
practicing while they're looking for the seriousness of his knee injury, but he almost definitely will not be playing this week. We lost Tajay Spears to a hamstring, Dontavian Wicks to a shoulder injury, Jerome Ford with a hamstring as Nick Chubb is coming back. Does Jerome Ford get his job back at all? And then Dallas Goedert, also a hamstring injury. So quite a few guys lining the medical tent this week, which brings us to fantasy. Let's say you've got a Dallas Goedert. Tight ends are now, after
Goddard.
4 weeks of doing
Goddard.
nothing, it's Goedert.
He got French since he got hurt,
It's
man.
French, bitch. Anyways, say you have a Goddard. I don't like the way that comes out. But who are you going to replace him with? We had tight ends doing nothing for the first 4 weeks of the season. Now all of a sudden, guys like Kittle and Andrews are actually scoring, and Evan Ingram is back on the Jaguars. Who are your big tight end risers from this week?
Well, more than likely, I feel like
got to be Evan Ingram.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, as a riser, he came right off the bench and he went 10 for 10, and
Yep.
I mean, he did have a fumble, but I mean, he instantly. Originally I had Christian Kirk as the sit of the week for whatever reason. I moved him out, but he instantly took those targets and ran off with it. I mean, 10 for 10 is incredible. I don't expect him to get 10 catches every game, but I think 7 to 8 catches a game I think is well within the realm, and they needed him. I think it's clear that Lawrence has been struggling and needing a security blanket, so I like him as a riser for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, if you're scouring the waiver wire and you're in need of tight end help, obviously the guys that finally performed well, Mark Andrews, Ingram coming back, McBride, when he came back, he had a big game. Like, those guys weren't dropped. They're not available just about everywhere. They're on rosters. But there's a couple guys that potentially might still be available heading into waivers. And Cole Kmet, who's been a spike monster. He's had 2 monster weeks and 3 non-existent weeks. And even Hunter Henry had another solid game in New England. And with Drake May looking like, I don't know, I mean, he threw more touchdowns in that one loss to Houston than Jacoby Brissett had the entire season. So that, at the very least, the offense might be a little bit more viable. So if you're desperate for a tight end, Kmet and Henry are guys that are at least readily available that might be worth trying to nab to fill that spot on your roster.
Yeah, I've also had some luck with Otten. Is it on Tampa Bay? He's been consistent. Again, he's not a guy that's blowing the doors off, but he's a guy you can pick up and fill in for the week for sure. Njoku is looking like you could actually play him. He's back from injury. He had, I think, 8 targets this week, 5 catches. There's all of a sudden a position that looked like it was dead in the water for the first 3 weeks of the year. Now there's definitely some options out there.
Well, and for Njoku, don't forget Amari Cooper going to the Bills. Now Njoku is option number 1 on that team. I mean, and it's Jameis Winston starting supposedly. So even though I'd say fire up any defense playing against Cleveland, especially now, but also he'll get the ball to Njoku. I mean, that's a huge ups for Njoku.
Well, and that's some of the news this morning we hadn't got to. Jameis named the starter for the Browns, and Russ Wilson being named the starter for the Steelers. The 4-2 Steelers making a quarterback change. Is that just because of how much they're paying Russ, or they had to give him a shot, or is there something that Tomlin's seeing that we're not seeing?
I mean, I think if you watch the games, you see that Justin Fields, I mean, you can see that they're winning with complementary football, and Justin Fields isn't making game-breaking mistakes, but it's just not a very good offense. Like, Justin Fields is just not he's just not a great thrower of the football, and he's making plays with his legs, but that can only take you so far. I'm not really sure exactly why they're making the decision because they are still winning games, so it's a little weird to get benched after another win. But if you do watch the game, it's not great to watch.
Well, if anyone has watched Russ for the last couple of years, that hasn't been pretty to watch either.
No, not at all.
And at least Fields offers the ability, if the pocket breaks down, that he can extend a play, whether he's ends up running the ball or buying time for his receivers. Russ has become a statue, and when he was lighting it up and was borderline league MVP for a few years in Seattle, he was extremely mobile. That was his biggest asset, was extending plays, allowing Lockett to get open and free way down the field, and he hit him on deep balls. Like, that was half of their offense, it felt like. And since he became a statue the last couple of years, he's been atrocious. And I think Pittsburgh is going to find out real quick, oh, shit, all right, well, we paid this guy, and he still sucks. And this other guy was at least winning some games. Because if they lose to the Jets this week, which the Jets it's almost a must win for them for their season, I think people are really going to start looking at Mike Tomlin like, dude, what are you doing here? So it'll be really interesting, but I think it's a mistake.
It seems like you're just inviting, as soon as you lose, like you said, especially if you lose this week or heaven forbid the next 2 weeks, now you've got a huge quarterback controversy. People want to know why you pulled the quarterback that's winning. I feel like you're at risk of losing some standing with the locker room. I know Mike Tomlin is the most beloved coach in the NFL, but it's definitely a puzzling decision. But of all these,
well, it's a very un-Steelers decision too. I mean, it's kind of out of character for Tomlin and the Steelers because they've built their whole identity on stability basically, and here they have a relatively stable team, and even if the offense isn't great or elite, I mean, it's winning games, so it's weird to see them kind of rock that stability boat seemingly unnecessarily.
So, and of all these moves we saw this morning, we saw wide receivers for the Jets and Bills, new quarterbacks for the Steelers, new quarterbacks for the Browns. Who's going to have the biggest fantasy impact by what we've heard today? Does Devante Adams go way up? Does Garrett Wilson go down or up? Who are the guys that are taking the peripheral hits due to these moves?
Well, yeah, that's the thing that is really interesting. Yes, obviously Cooper going to the Bills. Cooper should at the very least become startable again because he hasn't been startable basically all year in Cleveland.
Not more.
But Devante going to the Jets is going to have such a huge impact. Fantasy owners that used a late first, early second round pick on Garrett Wilson, you have to assume, even though the drop in the end zone wasn't really on Wilson, Rodgers put the ball on him, but it was a great play by Taylor Rapp breaking that up. But Rodgers, we know the trust in the chemistry he has with Devante Adams, and I would expect that to come back pretty quickly. And so I think you have to start looking at Garrett Wilson potentially as a wide receiver 2, getting 6 to 8 targets a game instead of 8 to 12 targets a game. And then also
targets a game.
Well, that's the thing too, is that I actually think overall sustainability wise, that Devante Adams going to the Jets, I made a keeping it real about this. I think it's good for all of the Jets offensive players overall because we saw Garrett Wilson go from almost not startable to all of a sudden 20 plus points in 2 weeks, and I think there would have been an up and down while this Jets offense really doesn't seem to have a sustainable groove. But with Devante going and Garrett Wilson not taking the attention from the defense as receiver number 1, I actually think that the type of targets he'll get will be more sustainable. Maybe the ceiling is capped a little bit, but I think we're looking at 16 to 18 points a lot more reliably than before Devante got there.
I think I'm more on the Kendall side of this, where if you look at Garrett Wilson, he's really not having a great season. And his production the last couple of weeks has been strictly volume. And I think that volume has to go down when you're adding.
Well, that's kind of my point though, right? Because we're talking about the quality of targets.
But I think he right now he's not, and yeah, they might be better targets. So I could see it going both ways. I could see it opening more things up for him, but they've been pumping him the ball. If they take away half of that even and give it to Devante Adams, it's going to be tough for him to sustain the production, like you said, Kendall, that you drafted him for. With
Which he was drafted as a wide receiver one. He was a mid wide receiver one. There's
Right.
no way he's putting up mid wide receiver one numbers the rest of the season. There's just no way.
All right. Well, let's go moving in to our next week's fantasy football. Who are your big risers for the week? Who are guys that you're are coming up on your board or you've had on your team, but now they're really solidifying positions? Who do you got?
Well, one guy, and I know you're going to like this, Rob, Chase Brown, which, a couple weeks into the season, you and I were both high on Chase Brown coming into the year. And the first couple of weeks, it was pretty obvious, like you talked about, I think, around week 2. He wasn't seeing the field. He was getting like 15% snap share. Zach Moss was by far the lead dog, becoming a 3-down back. Here we are just a few weeks later. Zach Moss gets relegated to the bench after another fumble. And doesn't essentially touch the field almost the rest of the way. And even though Chase Brown isn't putting up monster numbers, all of a sudden, he's the leader in snap share, targets, touches. And in that Bengals offense that's getting better and better, which they do every year, they start slow every year, and then they catch fire. Like, they're going to be scoring 25, 30 a game the rest of the season. And if Chase Brown is going to be their RB1 rest of the year, man, if you scoured him off the waiver wire a couple weeks ago, you should be pretty happy, I think.
Yeah, that fumble for Zach Moss couldn't have come at a worse time for him, because this is right as Brown is surging, and it's exactly the type of mistake that coaches look for when they're deciding snap shares and things like that. So Chase Brown is definitely a huge riser. I agree. Another guy I'd like to talk about though is, and this guy has been doing it the whole time. But now we got to talk about him as like a top 10 receiver the rest of the way is Chris Godwin. We didn't really touch on this Saints Tampa Bay game, putting up 51, but Godwin, I just want to read some stats for you guys real quick because Godwin has been absolutely out of control. He leads the league in catches, he's third in yards, he's first in touchdowns, and he's first in yards after catch, and also first in yards after catch over expectation. Now this is the type of play that I expected coming into the year when I heard that Cooper Kupp role was going to be his. He's had a couple down years from injury, but this is totally sustainable in my opinion all the way through the year. And Mike Evans kind of didn't show up this last game, but he'll be coming back and doing it. But yeah, Chris Godwin I think is a huge boon for the rest of the year as a riser. Drew, who do you got going on?
Well, the guy that I've had on my roster for a while, but had a slow start, but who now is coming on stronger and stronger, is Terry McLaurin. I think his first 2 games were double-digit games, or single-digit games, and then after that, he's blown up 4 straight weeks. He looks like a wide receiver 1 for sure, if not top half of the league or top half of the wide receiver 1s. And I think with their schedule coming up, he's actually got kind of an easy road to keep plowing these points. And yeah, he's gone from a guy that I was like, okay, he's a wide receiver 3, maybe 2, to like, oh, now I've got a wide receiver 1 that I didn't expect because Jaden Daniels is playing so well. So that he would definitely be my riser of the week. I do like Downs in Indianapolis. It's hard to judge how much of his flowering is him just getting used to the offense now and really being worked in, and how much of it has been Joe Flacco. So now we're going back to Anthony Richardson. Maybe want to wait a week and see how that pans out, but he's looked great and he's getting the targets. We're just going to see if the targets are of the same quality with Richardson, I think.
Yeah, and
by the way,
I'm
McLaurin
really disappointed
leads
by
the
that.
league in air share percentage on his team. He has the most air yards and air share percentage of any receiver across
of course.
the
I mean,
NFL.
what other receivers do they have? Diami Brown, that's a no-brainer. But no, back to your point about Josh Downs, though. Drew, you and I really liked him. We talked about him before the season, and he missed the first couple games with injury. And since he started and he's playing, 70, 80% snap share, he looks every bit the player we thought. And I was super excited. I started in one of my leagues this week and was happily rewarded. I then also made the mistake in benching him in another league for Jalen Tolbert. That didn't work out so great. But I'm really, really mad that Richardson's coming back, because at the very least I know Flacco can sling the ball around and get the ball to his receivers. And Richardson at this point, who knows where he's throwing the football. So I wonder if Downs will be able to keep up that success.
Oh, now what about another guy that's affected by these trades or these moves today, George Pickens? I know We talked about him about possibly being a faller. He had 3 for 63 this week, but does Russ Wilson coming in make Pickens more of a viable start or less?
I think he stays right where he is, a wide receiver 3 that you don't feel very good starting most weeks. Like, unless Russ suddenly turns the clock back, but we have enough tape on him for the last couple of years to see what he is today, and it is not the same guy when he was lighting up the league in Seattle. And so, I guess you could say Pickens is more talented than Cortland Sutton when he was in Denver last year, but like, did Sutton have any boon of a year? Not at all. So, I mean, personally, I think he just stays right where he's at.
I actually think it is benefit to Pickens that Russ comes in, not because the Steelers are better overall with Russ in there, but I just think as a wide receiver 1 on that team with Russ, he has a better chance of putting up a little bit more production than with Justin Fields. So I'm gonna say for Pickens, it is actually a benefit. I just don't think it's like some huge benefit that all of a sudden you want him in as your wide receiver too.
Well, what about other fallers? What guys are kind of dropping off that you're looking to get rid of or that you don't trust anymore?
I'm going to eat some crow here. It's that time of the show, I think. I was super high on DJ Moore entering the year, and we are now 6 weeks in, and even though Caleb Williams has gotten better and better and better, if you take away, he had a 6-yard touchdown 3 weeks ago at the end of the fourth quarter in a game that wasn't close. You take away that garbage time TD, and he's like wide receiver 45, I think, on the season. Now, granted, he had a garbage time TD taken away from him this week. They said he scored first, then they looked at the replay, said he was out at the 1, and then they scored on the ground the next play. But even still, like he's getting 6-7 targets a game. They're running the football far better. DeAndre Swift is actually really come on. And with Keenan Allen now coming back from injury and looking like he's going to be a legit part of this offense, Cole Kmet being a red zone monster again that we saw a couple of years ago, like if I'm a DJ Moore owner, which I am in one of my leagues, I am looking to move him because I just don't believe the consistency is going to be there, but his reputation might still hold that of someone that might, so you might get some value.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kendall. It's a little bit of a whack-a-mole for the receiver that's going to have the production on the Bears. And if you watch that game in the red zone, Caleb is looking for Keenan Allen. That's his security blanket. He likes the big body and all that stuff like that. So, yeah, I agree with you. DJ it's worrisome. It's one of those guys that's hard to start. Um, I guess for me, we already kind of touched on it with Zach Moss being a faller. But I'm a little bit worried about the waiver wire darling Tank Bigsby. My concern, I happened to pick him up actually off the waiver for free before that game, so I didn't put any fab into it, but I was really excited to give him a shot and play him, and he just didn't deliver this last week. And my concern going into it, that kind of proved
It's the
true.
Bears defense.
But it's also the thing that I was concerned about that kind of proved true is he gets zero passing work. And it's hard when the Jaguars are not really together and they're kind of in these shootouts. They're gonna need a dual threat back and a
Yeah.
and even when they're competing, it's still high scoring, so they still need to pass. They can't ground and pound really much. Bigsby kind of the last the 2 weeks prior made his mark off of huge plays and stuff like that. But what's the sustainability there when Dearness Johnson immediately stepped in and was the guy for the rest of that game and had so much work? I know it's the Chicago Bears defense, but you would think that Bigsby would be the guy they turn to after an injury to ETN. It was like the perfect opportunity, and he didn't really show up. So it's definitely a concern moving forward, and I want to see next week their usage when they have a full game plan with Bigsby as the guy or Dearness. We're just going to have to see. I mean, I think a common theme throughout fantasy football is that we always think the next guy in line is going to have this superstar moment when the lead back goes down, and more times than not, it still ends up being a split backfield now in this modern NFL. It happens over and over and over again, including in the Bucks backfield, which we didn't really touch on.
I was just going to say that's kind of what's been happening in Tampa Bay. Now, Rob, you follow the Bucks more than anybody that I know. Who's the guy to play here? Can you trust any of them? Is it just going to be a who's the hot hand every week. What are you doing there fantasy-wise with the Bucks backfield?
Well, as you know, especially in conversations with Kendall, I've been reluctant to kind of have Rashad relinquish his RB1 role here. But guys, I gotta say that having a third guy absolutely blow everybody away in his first opportunity in an audition, basically, is what they gave him. This, it's more concerning for this overall backfield in fantasy, but especially for Rashad and his usage moving forward. I mean, Sean Tucker, who a lot of people don't even know who that is, he was a monster at Syracuse, and if it weren't for a really concerning heart condition going into the draft, that year, that was the Bijan Robinson draft class. That year, he was universally a top 4 back in that draft class. He was like 3 or 4. He runs 4.3. He's got power mix, so he's a real guy. So now that there's a third guy in here, now I'm willing to start talking about Rashad losing enough of a share to lose that RB1 status. I mean, if I had to pick of the 3 guys to own in that backfield, I kind of right now wouldn't want to go for anybody. But if I had to pick, it would be Bucky, because I still think that he's going to have, while Rashad's out for sure, have the lead back duties. He had in the first half, when it was kind of this back and forth crazy game, by the way. If you were not a fan of either, it was probably the most entertaining game of the year so far. Being a fan of either one of those teams, though, was pretty heart-wrenching overall. But Bucky would be the guy I'd own. And then you definitely, because he's out there for free, you got to take a look at Sean Tucker, because Bowles in press conferences, he was pressed about it yesterday. And you can tell that, when a player is given that type of opportunity and he performs like that, the coaching staff was blown away, and they have no choice but to give him another opportunity, and he'll have one this week against the best run defense in the Ravens. So we'll have to see how that goes. But I would pick Bucky just because he's kind of in the middle between Rashad and Sean, and you know that Bucky, regardless, is going to get a role there.
Well, and he is still productive despite Tucker having this monster game coming off the bench. Bucky still had, 18 for 90? Average 5.5 yards per carry. He's averaging over 6 yards a carry on the season. Like, dude is still productive every time he's on the field. So I'm with you that, like, he is. And it's a great problem to have for Tampa Bay, to go with their weapons on the outside. Like, that offense is going to be legit all season long. And anyone that is not a believer in Baker's resurgence is just lying to themselves. I'm not a Baker fan whatsoever. But, like, he clearly has turned a corner. And has become a much more competent, consistent quarterback. But before we move on, there is one other guy that I think we need to talk about really briefly. But it is very, very concerning considering where he was drafted, and that's Jahmyr Gibbs. Gibbs went mid-second round at the latest in almost every league, was expected to be a mid-RB1 across the board. This was his coming out party year. I talked about it a few weeks ago, and I said, I still have reservations as to whether or not Montgomery might be a 1A, 1B. Now it's looking like Montgomery is 1 and Gibbs is 2. And there's lots of data to back that up, especially red zone utilization. When the Lions get inside the 5-yard line, they give Montgomery the ball almost every play. Like, that dude is scoring us once or twice from inside the 5, like seemingly every game. And they basically alternate possessions. So they're alternating possessions between the 20s, and then once they get inside the 10, they give Montgomery the ball. And if that's the case, and you got Montgomery in the 5th, and then you're sitting real pretty. And if you took Gibbs in the 2nd, there's some serious reason to be concerned here.
Yeah, I think Gibbs is definitely still has some value in the passing game. He gets 5 or 6 targets a game.
Of course, he's still good.
Yeah,
he's still a good back.
The lack of goal line carries has definitely swung it where I think you're right. David Montgomery's the 1A. Even if they're going to split carries, he's the guy you want in fantasy, and you got him far cheaper.
I'm with you on the draft capital you spent, because obviously Montgomery is looking like just an absolute steal. But I will say that if I'm a Gibbs owner, just hold off on the panic mode just yet, because he's still performing with high efficiency. He still got 15 touches last game, and he kind of just didn't get the touchdown last game, which is kind of the issue. But I will say, you also got to consider this Aiden Hutchinson injury, and like we talked about a little bit more, they're going to be in more shootouts, and when they can't just ground and pound and run these games out, Gibbs is going to have a bigger role. And so I really do think season long, that actually the Hutchinson injury is actually indirectly going to
Could
affect
help
Gibbs.
Gibbs.
And
Yeah.
I'm not super
That stands
worried
to reason.
about Gibbs. I still like what he's doing with his touches. And Montgomery just had a monster game, and they destroyed the Cowboys. So
Well, but
Gibbs, like,
Montgomery's had a monster game almost every game this
no,
year. Like,
Montgomery
he's
is
not going
great.
away.
I'm not saying that. I just think that there's room for Gibbs to still do what he was always going to do. He was never going to be a 25 touch a game player. He was always going to be a high efficiency big play guy, and I still see that even more so now that I think that the Lions are going to be in some more shootouts than they would have without their monster pass rusher.
Yeah. Well, let's let that take us into this week's games. Uh, week 7, or is this week 6? Oh, this is week
This is week
7
7.
coming up.
Week 7.
Key games. We've got start off with the Texans visiting Green Bay to play the Packers. Now the Packers favored by 2.5. Two good offenses coming together. Two teams that are looking like they're getting ready for a playoff push. Who do you like here, Kendall?
You know, this is maybe my most difficult game of the week to predict. As much as I love Jordan Love and I like what Green Bay is doing on offense, and their defense is quietly performing decently well, I think I like Houston to go on the road and get a victory here. Anytime games are close, all I have watched CJ Stroud do is win. Uh, last week when they were playing in Buffalo, I had to talk my buddy off the ledge. He wanted the Bills, and I said, no, we both know this game's going to be close. And I've watched the Bills lose so many close games, and I'm yet to watch CJ Stroud lose a close game in the NFL. He's won every close one he's been in, and I think this game will be close as well. I think they are going to do a much better job of running the football. Joe Mixon coming back last week, man, did he look good. And even without Nico Collins, that's why, hey, they have another stud receiver in Stephon Diggs. Tank Dell looks like the Tank Dell that we saw last year. And with that running game and their defense is above average, I think they're going to go on the road in a really tight battle. But I like Houston on the road.
In 2 full games, Mixon has had over 29 points in fantasy. I mean, his usage is just unbelievable, and he wears teams down. I'm with you, Kendall. I'm gonna pick the Texans to win this. Looking at this slate of games this week, I love the matchups we're having, and this is no exception. But I'm with you for all the reasons that you listed. I would have even been higher on Texans, obviously, if they had Nico back. But I like the trio of Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, and Joe Mixon.
All right, I'm gonna go Packers here. I think Green Bay is finding their stride. I agree with you. It's going to be a close game at the end. I'm going to take Green Bay at home though, but I can't say I'm completely confident with it. Actually, I'd take the Texans to cover, but I'll take the Packers to win. Let's stay in the NFC North though. Lions at Vikings for who's going to be the head of the division after this week. Are the Lions hurting too much from the Hutchinson injury? I know both teams are looking at this as their Super Bowl. Rob, who do you like here? Vikings favored by 2.5 at home.
Well, you just said it. For me, it's the Hutch injury. I would have actually picked the Lions here, but the Hutch injury, to me, I think I'm a little more concerned about that than maybe you guys are, or I could be wrong about that, but to me, it's a big loss. A huge loss. Their D-line, I don't think, is going to create pressure here, and the Vikings have had a bye week to prepare for the Lions. So, the Hutch injury, he was one of the leaders of their team. I think that's one of those that those soul-sucking moments for a team. So I think the Lions are going to be in a little bit of that hangover, and the Vikings are going to come out and outright win this game. So I'm going to lay the points for the Vikings.
Yeah, I'm with you, Rob. Even though I think the Lions are a better football team, they're a more physical football team. I love their head coach. I love so much of that team, but their secondary has been a mess all year. They haven't really fixed it. Arnold has not really panned out. And now without their best defensive lineman, who was, like you talked about earlier, like he had more sacks and pressures than the rest of the D-line combined. And knowing they're coming off a 40-point win in Dallas, you're naturally going to come down to earth a little bit after a performance like that. And you're facing a divisional rival on the road who's coming off a bye. So for those reasons, I'm with you. I like Minnesota to win and cover.
I'm going to go with you there. I think Minnesota wins and covers. I'm hearing rumors that the Lions might be trying to reach out now that and see if the Raiders are selling. Can they bring in Max Crosby to replace Hutchinson for the year? So it might be interesting to watch with all these moves happening. Are the Raiders really in sell-off
That would be
mode?
wild. That dude is an animal.
They're gonna have to throw the
So
house at the Raiders because they love that guy. They're not gonna part with him for market value. They're gonna wanna see someone shoot for the moon to give that guy away.
another big game we've got this week. We've got a Super Bowl rematch. The Chiefs at the 49ers. 49ers favored by 1.5. Does this go to overtime? Look like the Super Bowl? What's your take on this game, Kendall?
I mean, at this point, I think there has to be some psychological edge for the Chiefs anytime they play the 49ers. They know, like, we could play a C plus, B minus game and you could play great, but if this game's close late, we're going to make the plays and we're going to win the game. And knowing the best unit, which I'm shocked that I'm saying this, but the best unit of the 4 units in this game is clearly the Chiefs defense. The Niners are still banged up a little bit on both sides of the ball. And I know that their offense, they're getting healthier and they're rounding into form. But with Mason now down, and now they're down to Guerrero, the rookie running back, which he had he ran for 90 yards on like 11 carries. It looked like a world beater. San Fran is probably the only offense that you can just plug a guy in there, apparently. But not this week, not against this defense, not against Chris Jones. I think the Chiefs win and move on and remain undefeated. And the Dolphins, 72 Dolphins, they're going to have to wait a little bit longer to pop their champagne.
Yeah, I'm with you, Kendall. I mean, I know you guys know that I'm big on looking at what the best unit in games are, and that really heavily decides it for me a lot of times. And I'm with you on that as well. You know, the Chiefs defense is the best unit in this game, and this game this game has got to be so important for the 49ers to touch on the psychological aspect, like you said. I mean, they have got to want to beat the Chiefs so badly. And so normally I would kind of, without hesitation, say the Chiefs, and I'm still going to ride with them. But I could also see the 49ers coming out and wanting this even more. That being said, I'm with you, Kendall. I got the Chiefs in this game.
Yeah, that's going to make it a trifecta because, I'm going with the Chiefs. We don't know if Jordan Mason's going to play. McCaffrey's not playing. That defense is hurting. I think the Chiefs have had a bye week to get ready, and I think they're going to take it down. So let's see if we're all agreeing on that. We've got the big game. The Ravens going to Tampa to take on Robb's Buccaneers. Ravens favored by 3.5 on the road. Are people underestimating the Bucs here, Rob?
I mean, kind of when do they not underestimate the Bucs? So I mean, I guess it's kind of just that's like part. Actually, as Bucs fans, the Bucs community, I can speak for them. We prefer to be underestimated because it seems like whenever we're not underestimated, the team comes out flat. So just keep not talking about us, and we'll slide in. But look, I want to so badly to say the Bucs outright win this. We have a gauntlet coming up this next month, and while the most important victory of that month is against Atlanta, we also want to see us beat one of the Ravens, San Francisco, or the Chiefs in this next month. I just don't think that Monday Night Football is going to be it. I think the Ravens are going to win this game, but I do think that this is going to be an entertaining game. As you touched on earlier, Kendall, this Bucs offense is not going away. And the Ravens, while having the best run defense in the league, are a true pass funnel. So the Bucs are going to be able to put up points. Now it's just going to be a matter of how much we let Lamar take over the game. Now this is regular season Lamar, so I fully expect him to come out and ball out. So yeah, unfortunately, as much as I want to say the Bucs are going to win this game, I like the Ravens and I like them to cover. Not because it's going to be a blowout, but I can see them winning by 4 to 7 points here.
I think you have to take Baltimore to win the game if you're betting on the money line. All you need to know is 22-1. Lamar Jackson is 22-1 against the NFC. Like, that's fucking insane. So until he loses a second game against the NFC, I'm always going to pick Lamar to beat whatever NFC opponent. But for the reasons you talked about, Rob, the secondary in Baltimore has not been very good. I do expect Tampa Bay to be able to move the ball. They will score some points. This game is at home. The crowd's going to be rocking. I think they hang in. I'll take Tampa with the points, but Baltimore will win the game.
Yeah, I'm going to take Tampa Bay in this one. I think Baltimore's due for a letdown after their big win against the Commanders, and I think Tampa Bay is going to be ready at home. I also think it's harder to run right up the gut on Tampa Bay, and that's what the Ravens want to do. We'll see. I know Lamar Jackson already has 1,500 passing yards this year. He's on his way to his best passing season ever, but I think we'll see if he has to do that, how much he can really come through against the Bucs. So I'm taking Tampa Bay
I
there.
will say of the Giants, and by that I don't mean the New York Giants. I mean the big teams in the NFL right now. This matchup is actually okay for us. You know, we have a very good run defense. We've had one of the best over the last couple of years. So, you know, and like we talked about, the Ravens are a true pass funnel. So matchup wise, if this Kendall, if you're right and they're not clearing 3.5 points at the end of the game, if we're within three or under or less than three, we have the kicker that leads the NFL in all of its history of 50 plus yard field goal percentages. He's made it at a higher clip than any other kicker in history. So if it does end up coming down to that, like you're alluding to a little bit, this could be a very fun game to watch for non-fans.
Well, and conversely, Justin Tucker, who's notoriously recognized or universally recognized as maybe the best kicker in NFL history, the last 2 years, he has the lowest make percentage beyond 50 yards in the NFL. So, like, age is catching up to the great old Justin Tucker. He's been dreadful from deep. So that knowing this game might be close late, that could prove pivotal.
I love it. Well, let's take a quick look at these other games. We won't go into depth, but just get your picks here. Let's start on Thursday night. We got the Broncos playing the Saints. Who are you taking?
I got the Broncos just because of their defense against Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, I mean the Broncos are going to be without Sertan, but the Saints are going to be without their top two receivers and quarterback. So I'm going to end up taking the Broncos, and I'm going to be interested to see Bo Nix here in this game.
I'm gonna take the Broncos here as well. I think without Shaheed, you got Spencer Rattler playing. Olave might be out. I think the Saints are short on weapons, and I think Denver's going to take advantage. How about Dolphins Colts 10 a.m. The high profile game everybody's been waiting for, the Tua-less Dolphins versus the Colts, who get their quarterback back at Anthony Richardson. Is that a plus or a minus? Who takes this one?
I'm going to take the
Does
Colts.
anyone know if JT is back?
I do not. I don't think it's been announced yet.
I think either way you got to take the Colts here, but definitely if JT is back.
Uh, I think so too. The Dolphins have had about the worst run defense in the NFL this year. I'm going to take the Colts, even if it's Trey Sermon toting the rock there. How about another big matchup? The Patriots and Jaguars. Patriots actually looked like half of a team this week with Drake May starting. Kendall, are your
Still
boys going
lost
to
by
do it
20.
again? Well, yeah, true. But this week they have much easier competition in the Jaguars coming home from an overseas trip. Oh no, actually, sorry, this game is in London.
It's still
Uh,
in London.
can the Jaguars pull it off? Does Drake May give the Patriots enough to put it over the top? How do you see it breaking down?
I got the Jags. The fact that they're staying in London, they're there for 2 weeks, I think is a bigger factor than a lot of people are going to realize. And even though I think Doug Peterson is clearly in the hot seat, and that has really exploded in his face, the whole situation, and he's probably out at the end of the year. This week, since they get to stay in London, New England's going out there, still have a rookie quarterback. I'll take the Jags in a weird, quirky game.
Three drop touchdowns by the Jags receivers in that game. So Ingram's back. I do like the split share from what I saw of Dearness Johnson and Bigsby, so I'm taking the Jaguars as well. I think Drake May. I think that defense is going to make Drake May look good, and I think we're going to start talking about Drake May moving forward. But Jags.
I'm going to go with the big upset of the week and take the Patriots here. And I got about 50-50 that Peterson doesn't make that flight back with that team. We've talked about it before. London is where you fire your coach. I don't know if there's a tax incentive for doing it overseas or not, but I think if they lose to the Patriots this week, Doug Peterson might be finding his own charter flight back. Moving on, we've got the Seahawks going to Atlanta to take off on the Falcons. Two teams that have looked pretty decent so far, but this could really separate them come playoff time. Who do you got here?
I got Atlanta at home.
I got the Seahawks here. If it weren't for a couple called back touchdowns and a tiny pinky toe out of bounds in this last week, Gino would have had at least a couple more touchdowns there, and the Seahawks would have won that game last week. So I like them to come back. They're a little more desperate than the Falcons. So I like a shootout here, though. I think it's going to be a fun game to watch.
Yeah, I'm going to take Atlanta here. I think it will be a shootout. I think the Falcons get the last word. Let's go to the Titans going to play the Bills with brand new receiver Amari Cooper. Do the Titans have a shot?
No.
No. I'm out on the Titans.
No, they do not have
I'm
a shot.
so mad. I'm so mad. I'm so mad at that team right now, dude. I just for a ton of reasons I'm mad at that team, and I'll leave it at that.
I think that's going to go all three of us for the Bills. The Bengals taking on the Browns. Recently, Amari Cooper less Browns. But Jameis Winston, can he come in and get a divisional win here to really end the Bengals' hopes at a playoff run almost?
No.
I think this
Same
game
response.
is going to be a good one for the Bengals because I think they're going to run away with this one. I think Jameis is going to throw 2 picks, and I think a Bengals defense that's really been struggling is going to find a groove here, and we'll see if they can build momentum off of that. Because I had them coming in being the division winners, and that just hasn't panned out so far because of their defense. But I think the Bengals, this is going to be a big game for the Bengals moving forward, I think.
I'm going to go another upset here. I'm going to take the Browns. It's looking like they might get Deonta Foreman and Nick Chubb back this week. You got Jameis. I think this offense is unexplored what it could do without Deshaun Watson, and I don't know if the Bengals are going to be ready for it. That Bengals defense has made a lot of offenses look good. That Browns defense could still be pretty solid. I think the Browns pull a rabbit out of the hat here, especially in a divisional game and at home.
Who's their wide receiver one? Is it Elijah Higgins?
Don't ask questions like that, Rob. We're just going picks. I don't have time to pull up the Browns roster. I have no idea. We've got Eagles, Giants, an NFC matchup to see, who can get close to 500. The Giants have been hanging in games. Malik Neighbors might be back this week. The Eagles have looked like a mess, but still managed to win. They're 3-2 right now. Who are you taking here, Kendall?
Eagles own the Giants. These games usually, they haven't been close in recent memory.
Yeah, and the Eagles are getting healthier and healthier. The win wasn't super impressive last week, but the Cleveland Browns defense is legit. And also, this Giants defense is legit. I don't think they're getting enough credit for what this Giants defense is doing. The defensive line is a real one. They destroyed the Seahawks offensive line last week, and even though they lost this game, their offense didn't put up any points, and they held the Bengals to a pretty low-scoring affair. So I'm not going to go with the Giants in this game. I'm going with the Eagles. I kind of picked them to win the division this year. I think they're getting healthier, but the Giants, Tyrone Tracy, and the defense is legit.
Man, I love this Giants team, and
I'm taking the Eagles. I'm going to take the Eagles as well. I'm not going to do a defense of the Giants beforehand, but I guess we all agree there.
I just want to make sure they get their flowers,
The Raiders and the Rams in Los Angeles. Another game that's going to be pretty ugly to watch. There is rumor we might see Cooper Kupp returning here this week or next. What's your thoughts on this game?
The Rams, McVay at home, off a bye against a team that just signed their season over and said we're done with this fiasco. Yeah, give me the Rams.
Yeah, all I need to know is Sean McVay coming off a bye. I'm going the Rams. Doesn't matter if Cooper Kupp's in there or not.
Yeah, I don't. They might win without even having to throw the ball this week. Kyron Williams could go for 150 on that Raiders defense. It wouldn't surprise me. Panthers playing the Commanders. Is Dalton going to get a win?
Love Washington.
I'm with you there. I feel like at this point, you should be playing Bryce Young. There's no reason to be, even if Andy Dalton looks better, put Bryce Young in and get him some experience. Let him have a bad year and learn. But I don't see how your team's being helped by going 3-14 with Dalton at quarterback. I don't see how that makes you better.
As someone that's betting on Washington this week, do not listen to Drew's advice. please.
Stick
Yeah,
with Dalton.
Jay and the Commanders, it's got to be the Panthers' defense is atrocious. We talk about their offense, but their defense is really it's just so bad. So I see Jaden having a big game.
All right. And now, what about the Jets Steelers? The Jets with newfound toy Devante Adams, who I think we all assume his hamstring is going to miraculously heal this week and he'll be ready to go. Uh, does that put the Jets over the top? This is, like you said, kind of
His
a
hand.
must win. Exactly. But especially against the Steelers team that if the Jets are going to crawl into the playoffs, they're going to probably have to crawl over Pittsburgh. Can the Jets pull that off?
These two teams historically, their games almost always come down to a field goal late. And although I wouldn't be too inspired with my field goal kicker after Monday night's performance if I'm the Jets, that was in crazy windy conditions. I think you can brush that aside. I think the Jets are better than what they've shown thus far. I think the Steelers are not as good as what their record says. And for those reasons, I like the Jets to get the win in this game.
Yeah, I actually, despite the loss and the sour taste and how it worked, I actually saw a lot of promise for this Jets offense. I mean, and you can't understate or you can't overstate how much Devante Adams coming there for Aaron Rodgers specifically is going to open up this whole offense. But you saw what the Jets could do if they went run first, and I like what I saw in flashes there, and I think over the next couple of weeks as Devontae gets worked in, I still believe that the Jets are going to pull it together on offense. Now, the defense, I don't know what happened last game. I mean, the head coach came out and said the defense was the losing effort of all the units on the team. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to take the Jets in this one. For all the reasons Kendall said, I think that they have promise on the offensive end, and I think the Steelers also are not as good as their record, especially if we're throwing Russ in all of a sudden.
Yeah, I'm going Jets. I'm taking A-Rod over Russ every time. How about last Monday night, Chargers Cardinals in Arizona? I'm taking the Chargers here. How about you guys?
Yeah, I like the physicality of the Chargers. In Harbaugh, I trust against a bad defense that you can run on. Yeah, I think Dobbins is looking at he's got to be salivating already.
Yeah, Marvin Harrison is going to be out most likely. I mean, I guess Monday gives you an extra day to clear, but most likely the concussion is 2 weeks, so he's probably going to be out. And Kyler's kind of been up and down and left and right. This Arizona Cardinals defense team, overall has been kind of up and down, left and right. The defense is not good. So Chargers in Harbaugh we trust. I didn't trust him going into the year, Kendall, so that was my mistake. Eat a little crow on that. Not because their team are world beaters, but because he gets them ready to play every single week and they compete despite what I think is a depleted roster. So I definitely like the Chargers.
And then one more game. I haven't really studied up on this one as much. The Cowboys are playing some team called Bye Week, but I'm going with Bye Week.
The smart money, the Sharps are on the bye week, for sure.
Sharps are on the bye week. Well, speaking of smart money, let's get to Kendall's corner here. Kendall, give us some betting tips for the week. What do you got? Where are you going?
All right, so for the first many weeks, I said it was fiscally irresponsible to make our money line parlay bet of the week. We finally have enough information that we know what teams are actually good. Gone are the days where the heavy favorites are actually losing games. And for that reason, we can roll out our moneyline parlay of the week. We're going to take the Bengals at home against Cleveland, Washington against Carolina, and Buffalo against Tennessee. Those three together, you'll get plus 110, so you're getting a little bit better than even money. That's a solid bet as opposed to picking some game against the spread individually with slightly better odds. And also, back to the futures, baby. We can take a look at potential division winners. We're at the point where we know who's going to win a lot of these divisions. And if you wait too far into the season, your value monetarily is gone. So if you bet Buffalo to win the AFC East, Baltimore to win the AFC North, Kansas City to win the West, which they've basically already won, Houston to win the South, which they've basically already won, and San Fran to win the NFC West, you'll get 2-1 on your money. You wait 3 weeks, that's going to be even money. Jump on that futures bet right now. Let's make some money.
I love it. Well, I think that'll do it for this week in the NFL with the Winning Play podcast. Again, I'm Drew James here for Robb Hue and Kendall Capps. Go out there and make some winning plays, and we'll see you next week.